ladies and gentlemen, absolute pleasure to be here. But before I kick off on what is in the session, I am a storyteller. I'm a journalist. So I'm going to begin with a story. There's a boy I know about 300 kilometers from here who wanted to be a footballer. He decided that at the age of 16, he will move out because the city that he is in does not possibly offer a turf or sporting professionals who will help him achieve his dreams. He comes from a middle-class family, so he moves to the next best possible place, which is Chandigarh. From Chandigarh, he gets trained. Now, it takes money, of course, to be trained. If you want to be a footballer in India, you know that there's not enough coaching facilities available, and he gets that right kind of coaching and the right kind of turf in Chandigarh. At this time, he's trained. He's told he has potential. So then he decides to go to Bengaluru. Bengaluru is where he starts his sort of professional football training as well as his journey. Now, it's already been 3 years in the process. He's now 21 years old. A lot of people are telling him that his time is over. A lot of others are telling him, don't listen to them. Your story is still unending. It's unfinished. It's not written off just as yet. Now, this is a story of a typical new India, where parents are not scared to send their children away because they believe sports has a future. At the same time, this is also a story of an audacious young person who is willing to put off his studies because he understands that his home city does not offer him that kind of facility and move out of his comfort zone to different cities at a very young, tender age of 16 years old. Now, this happens to be my brother, and I'm very fortunate to be sitting here. But this, as I said, is also a story of every other young Indian family, as well as a person who has willingness to do something, perhaps is not able to do so in absence of enough facilities, even though he has potential. As I said, his story is still unfinished, so we don't know. He may just be a professional footballer. But as we kickstart this session, the first big question I believe we have in front of us is that we want sports to have to be synonymous to brand India. I want to come to you, Lloyd, and since you're my co-panelist, and I think maybe you can take it off to other panelists here, how close are we to achieving that dream of India going beyond cricket and also building an image of a sporting nation?
Hey, thank you, Shweta. And I think we've got a great set of panel who should be answering this. But if I could just say one thing, I think the last decade truly has seen Indian sport come of age. As many people would say, for a long time we were a one-trick pony, right? Cricket was Indian sport. I think clearly what we've seen in the last decade is the coming of age of many other sports. Of course, athletics with Neerav Chopra was a big turning point, but across chess, across badminton, across the whole range of sports, I think today India has become a major force. And I think that has been one significant achievement. And clearly just given the size of the growing Indian economy, I think you could say we were punching below our weight. I think that's slowly correcting itself. And I hope through the course of this session, we'll actually be able to probe deeper into this aspect.
I think no better than Pullela to answer that question. Pullela, do you still think we are punching below our weight? Do you think we are getting there just as yet? We heard Sports Minister just before the session, and he talked about how India has had a pivotal journey in sports in the last decade, and I believe a lot of you agree that there have been significant changes. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think the last 10 years have been phenomenal in Indian sport. I think the way the growth has been is enormous. The inspiration has been fantastic. No time before has the Prime Minister of the country spoken about sports so much. No time before has a prime news channel kicked off with sport as one of its major events. So I think we are looking at sport as a primary news making, as a primary decision making, people taking up sport. And I think I'll get back to your brother's story in that one bit, because what has happened is this huge inspiration, and also what the sports minister spoke about, Khelo India and all of that, has made kids in the country aspire, parents in the country think that this dream is possible. And they have taken up sport very, very rigorously. What is also happening is that kids, players are taking up sport, leaving education. Your brother left it at 16, so he at least has some leeway. But for some, it's happening at 9. And that is a big case of concern, wherein we have, because at the end of the day, sport has only a very thin margin of people. We have people speaking about how, and I don't know if I can articulate it very well, but we are talking about how there are 6,000 kids across various sports who are giving 6 lakhs a month and 3 lakhs a month and stuff. But in reality, what happens to the 5,600 people who don't make it? Where are they going for their jobs? Are they skilled enough for their next journey? I think this is a big case of concern. For me, who has seen the entire ecosystem of sport, for me, I think if you fail at 21, and if you have the education and the skill set, like I really loved when Barun said, I will pick people who have played sport. But what happens if that guy doesn't have any education at all? And this is a cause of concern. So at 30, if you're a world champion, you have another 30 years to live, and you don't have the skill sets for the next set of your life, what happens to you? So these are more of the concerns, because we have grown too fast. As a country in sport, we are still pushing forward in big force, and that is amazing. On that side of the story, I'm super excited, and it should continue. But I think we need to look at the entire ecosystem, because all it takes is one generation of failed sports person to show that the society, to show to the society, or the society will see it and say, there's no use playing sport. So you don't want that to happen.
So great to know that things are changing, and thank you for sharing that candidly, Gopi. I want to go across to Latika, and I know Latika from a different era, the late 90s when I headed marketing at Pepsi, and we used to go to Latika because she managed a whole bunch of Super A cricketers. Virendra Sehwag, I remember a long conversation with her. And then somewhere in the mid-2000s or 2005 thereabouts, she got into other sports. You, I think, signed on Abhinav Bindra and then subsequently other sports. So Latika, is it really changing when it comes to support to other sports? Or are we still predominantly a one-sport nation?
Well, fortunately, nothing ever happened to the primary sport. It only grew in size, stature. The leagues came on and gave a livelihood to so many more cricketers. So in every possible way, it's given money to coaches, to professionals, to marketing people, to people who genuinely wanted to make a career in sport. So let's not denounce cricket at the cost of other sports. We can definitely have everything coexisting. And in the 2 odd decades that I have been involved in this, definitely other sports have come a very, very long way. So I don't think we can say that other sports do not get their recognition. They definitely do. And I think it's all a part of the evolution. The boost has to come from private participation. The boost has to come from media, from channels, from various formats. And the more people who are involved in sport, the more are these solutions going to come out, because the sportsman has to play his sport. For everyone else to figure out how to make a livelihood for them, that is the job of marketing, of business. And I think everyone needs to redirect their energies, and examples of that would be the ISL League, the Pro Kabaddi tournament, the various other tournaments that have come up in the country, because we are a huge population and any amount of entertainment is never going to be enough. So we need to work on that.
Absolutely. Pierre, thank you for coming to India.
My pleasure.
Well, I think as a country which is known for its cricketing fanfare and the currency that it has, the biggest sporting currency that it has, and it has continued to bank on it for a very long time, is cricket. We want to change that image. We want to go beyond cricket, and we are moving those strides. I mean, we've discussed all of that, and we will continue to. But as far as football is concerned, as you have been associated with one of the biggest football leagues in the world, how do we build an ecosystem where we can help nurture talent from the very grassroots level?
So first and foremost, thanks for having me, and really impressed by this event. It's a great experience. And secondly, we should maybe touch base on your brother's career path for the future. Coming back to your question, how to build an ecosystem. Frankly, having tried to dig a bit deeper into the current situation of India's sports and your youth development system, I think let's say the foundation and the idea is exactly right. Looking at the idea of the Kilo India system, this is exactly what makes, I think, European sports successful. And then speaking maybe for Germany, because representing the second biggest football league in the world from Germany, this is how we build our ecosystem in terms of football, but also in sports. But it took a long time, right? It started right after World War II, like, you know, it took us several decades in order to, you know, lay the foundation of something we then, you know, were able to earn the credits from at a later stage. So I think that's the one part. The second part is, as Barun and the Minister of Sports exactly pointed out, it's about the events, getting the right events in. And yes, I think the ambition to have the Olympics 2036 is perfect, but there are so many other major events you could have and which could really help and make India benefit from. That's exactly the right way to do in order to get the attention from international, but especially also to build fandom and talent nationally.
Thank you.
Do you know, sorry, Lloyd, as far as fandom is concerned, with a show of hands, how many of you watch football? Religiously watch football? All right, I think those are half the hands down, but a lot of people are football lovers in the country. Even then, for some matter, and I spoke to my, you know, sports editor right before I got on this panel, because sporting is a self-admission, not something that I've done for a very long time. So she said that despite repeated efforts, for some reason, it just does not make enough money. So, you know, there is the value proposition, there's the economic sense to it, which happens to be missing. And we were discussing this before, you know, we came on the panel, that it's a classic chicken and egg situation to me. What do you do first? You pump in money, but then you also need enough reception, you also need enough revenues. But when the revenues only will come in when people are actually interested in watching. How do you break away from that conundrum?
I think never an easy situation, and a great question that, Shweta. I think the challenge is that today, with an increasing activist economy where shareholders want good returns, I think business leaders are tasked with ensuring they put their money where they get the best returns so that their companies prosper and shareholders get returns. Having said which, I think one big change that has happened is the government of India mandates that every company spends 2% of its post-tax profits on corporate social responsibility. I think where corporate India or India Inc. needs to look is virtually none of that gets into sport. Sport is considered too much of a, shall we say, a nice to do or a luxury. A lot of it goes into important issues like education and health. But I think the enablement of 2% of post-tax profits of a company for sports, I think is a great step in that direction. I think for that, the government needs to be applauded.
Absolutely.
Sorry. Maybe I would like just to add, looking at the stats we are working with, we see that almost 25% of the Indian population is interested in football, of which more than 40% are between 16 and 34, which means that, I don't know if everybody is within that target or age group, but it seems like that football is, you know, heavily growing in the younger target groups, which is great for us. We see our ratings on Sony more or less doubling each year. So you could sense an increasing demand for football, obviously in a very cricket-dominated market. Absolutely.
We have a very diverse group here, but I want to come to you, Marcus. I understand you are actively engaging with India to facilitate, you know, people, young people especially, who want training in football to have a free flow from one country to another where they can get the right sort of training and then come back and perform in India. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing with the government and with Indian institutions.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Great to be here. It's my first time in India and I'm really impressed. Yeah, we started in last June with one of my companies. You know, I was for nearly 24 years CEO of an Austrian football club. We played also international. But then I started my own business and we said, okay, how can we support also other countries in this kind of soccer? And together with a friend from Switzerland and Germany, we founded a company, and we have as a project 3 issues. Because the one you said, and I guess this is the key for the Indian population, is the young population, young people working on sports, training in sports in school. And what we want to provide is that regularly, not only one time, Indian kids who are selected here, who are trained here, can come for, let's say, 2 weeks to Austria, to Germany, to Switzerland, have training there, play there against youth academies, with the support like German Bundesliga, but also we talk to Austrian Bundesliga, to Swiss League, to give them a goal. And the second thing is also coach the coaches, bringing also coaches there, giving them the possibility to support. And don't forget, sports is a business, sports is an industry. So we also created programs, for example, for young doctors, for young lawyers from India who wants to work in sports. And I guess the know-how we have, especially in this region, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, within the last years with hosting the FIFA and UEFA, for example, in Switzerland, is a big possibility for young Indians, for young management people also to come there. Not only the children who want to play soccer, but also young students to come to Europe and also in the other direction. Very important.
Thank you, Marcus. I want to come to my friend Subhranshu, and he's CMO at Tata Motors. And the Tatas, as we all know, have always been invested in sport, even long before CSR and such things came in. I remember back in the 80s, the Tata Football Academy bought in Pele's Cosmos, and this was another era. But the Tatas have consciously worked closely with sports, and not just at the macro levels. But as a marketer and a business person, Subhranshu, do you think corporate India does enough for sport? Not just in a manner of the kind of returns they get, but also in terms of what needs to be done to build sports, the whole sports ecosystem in the country?
Well, purely as a marketer, I can say that the short answer is yes. Because today, the media ecosystem, all put together in terms of monetary value, is growing at about 15 to 16%, whereas the economy has grown by 7 to 8%. So you have the answer, it's a double the clock rate. But we must realize, you mentioned CSR and other efforts to promote sports, including the trebling of the budget from the government side. But as a marketer, I'm looking to reach them, audiences, premium advertising audiences. So there are 3 large trends which have shaped the sports ecosystem. One is India is getting more affluent. Even at 7%, we double the GDP every 10 years. Naturally, it leads to leisure, it leads to recreation, it leads to India pride, which is a very important thing. The second thing that's happened is digital and television have merged in many ways. Social networking became social media at the same time that television started getting more and more aggressively about premier events. So from a business standpoint, why we are interested in sports is to reach the right audiences, give them what is really pure play reality TV. There is an event happening, there is an undecided conclusion to it. There is a large fan audience, there are committed eyeballs. And that's very precious and advertising which you don't miss. But with the emergence of digital going into live broadcasting in sport, they're actually moving away from digital because it's not about cheaper click streams, it's not about take action now, it's about creating something that has cultural cachet, something that has uniqueness, finesse, and elevation. So that cultural sensibility and preciousness is incredibly important, and if a brand is meaningfully associated with a sport, it can really do magic for that brand.
Terrific. I want to quickly get Gopi in, and as a sports superstar who brought us a lot of glory in a, shall we say, a less enabling atmosphere. And now as a sporting parent, your daughter Gayatri has achieved remarkably. What is your one big ask from policy makers, policy enablers, and from the corporate establishment? I mean, we've got Mr. Kant, we've got lots of big decision makers here. What do you think we need to do better to accelerate India's sporting prowess?
I think from policymakers, there is one, maybe two things which I would think is important. And way back I had heard about Modi ji talking about a bridge being made. He said somebody who's making the bridge is different, somebody who owns, like the municipality owns it, the railways has to build it, the roads have to be, they're different people. So in a similar sense, for performance, there are too many people involved. There is associations, there's government, there's private parties, there's managers, there's the whole lot of ecosystem. So I think that needs to be streamlined. Because on one side is the corporate side, the marketing side, the entire ecosystem of very different things. But performance is purely another ball game. It needs a set of people who are really committed, whether it's players, whether it's coaches and support staff, and an ecosystem which builds performance. We need to keep that isolated from the rest of it. So I would really look at policy and say, boss, get this done for us.
Okay.
The second thing for me which would be important is that what happens to, because there are thousands and thousands of people who are taking up sport. A very small percentage of them are successful. What happens to the huge number which we don't make it? How are we going to ensure that their lives are secure? So this would be also something which I would want to really look at sports policy. And one legislation which I would really love to see is government telling that we are not under bureaucrats. Sports administration is not under politicians, but sports is managed by professionals and people who know stuff and who are sports persons. That, from a legislation point, I would really want to see.
All right, fair enough. Latika, I think 2 to 3 very important points that Gopi made there. One, of course, is that sports should be managed by professionals. And the other is what happens to those who don't really succeed. If they don't have enough education, what are the leeways for them? As far as your understanding of managing sports for years now is concerned, what is your big ask of the government? What should they do now, especially at a time when India is aspiring to host Olympics? Let's address that as well. How do we up that performance?
The whole question of sports marketing, and it's a lot of foreign universities do offer courses in sports marketing or sports management. And a lot of children are very interested because they automatically assume that an interest in sports translates into some sort of skill at management, which is not necessarily true. The evolution of jobs which run parallel to it. Now, people who are in sports, sports coaches, sports association, people to manage the associations, people to manage the sport. But that is primarily, I think, to start a sport with the whole intent of making a career out of it and having 3 different options is not really the way it's going to be. Sport has to be played for sport's sake. And then as opportunities come up, I mean, to have a policy where you say employ a whole lot of people and say the sports ministry and all of that is a very counterproductive thing to do. I think everyone has to play sports without the intention of turning into an elite sportsman. Play sports for the many, many psychological, physical, emotional benefits it gives you. And if from there you find that it carves out a career for you, I don't think the government can get involved in actually mapping IPL was like, okay, they were elite sportsmen, some of them made a career in IPL, and now there is 100 different leagues all over the world where they can participate.
Right.
But that comes from the love of the sport. This generation that is playing these leagues and all today in Australia and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, they didn't know these opportunities were ever going to come up.
Absolutely.
So play for the sake of playing, enjoy your sport, excel at it as much as you can. But if you really think that there has to be a second grade to the whole thing, most old sports people become coaches, they become administrators, all my boys have become commentators now, which was unknown in the 90s. I mean, that they would have a career in commentary. Let life take you where it goes. I mean, to make a policy and say if you don't make the League A, you'll do this, you'll do that, things will sort themselves out as they go along.
Thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, we've run out of time on this session, but thank you very much, all of you, for taking time out, for being here with us today. An absolutely wonderful session on what the future of sports is looking like. It is nice, it is bright. There's a lot of work that has been done in the last 10 years, perhaps lots more to do upcoming in the next 10. Thank you very much, all of you, for being a very patient audience. Thank you.